Hi y'all, welcome back to my channel. For all of you who are new here, my name is Jessica Lang and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of California. And on this channel, I talk all things trauma, the brain, attachment, healing. So if you are interested in that, don't forget to click that subscribe button down below and ring the notification bell so you can upload. What am I trying to say? So you can be notified every time I upload a new video. So thank you all for watching my videos and subscribing to my channel. Earlier this month, I was notified by YouTube that I got 500 subscribers, which is so crazy because I've been doing this for a couple years now, and I never really paid attention to the numbers and all that. I just was making content, and so to have that notification felt really special and really cool. And I was like, oh, I should probably get back into making content since people are subscribing. They obviously want to see it. And then it's so funny because recently a couple of my clients have been calling me out like, why haven't you made any videos? And your videos bring me comfort. So this video is for those people who have been on my case. Those are my clients who've been on my case about making videos. I'm back. These are for you. But don't comment in the comments if you're one of my clients, because confidentiality and all that. We could talk about it in session, or you can send me an email. It's fine. But anyway, thank you guys for watching and liking my content. And now I have the community tab open, so I'll try to use that more and ask what kinds of videos and things that you all are interested in. But also you can comment in the comment section if you like my videos or things that you want to know, especially as it pertains to trauma. If you want me to talk, I love talking about the brain. I also like talking about somatic experiencing and talk about attachment. So if you like all that stuff, then just let me know what resonates with you all, and I'll try to make some videos about that too. So where I've been is just kind of living life. I wanted to jump back in, but then things just started to get really hectic and busy. Things with my clients, I felt like they were needing a little bit more support, and because they were needing more support, I needed to make sure I was also taking care of my own self and getting rest and all that. Other personal things have been going on. It feels like I don't know, it's not anything big, but well, I mean, there's some grief going on, but I'm not going to share that just because I haven't actually shared it on any of my social media. Just some dear friends have know about it. So I do try to keep some things private, but I was also grieving, and so that's a piece of things that was going on. But I think also just life, just getting busy and feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and so adding on doing videos felt kind of hard, and so that's why I kind of disappeared and was trying to take a little bit of a break, just trying to rest a little bit more. I also just was not really feeling inspired to create content, so that also made it really hard, and some self-doubt was creeping in also, and that makes it hard to get on video and talk about things, and things just feel really overwhelming. So I'm hoping that my first video back, which is this video, will just be like a nice kickstart into things, and it'll get me out of my funk. I mean, it's already helped. Like when I was writing this script and just reflecting on things, I was like, oh, I have this idea, I have that idea. So it's really just about sitting down and recording that tends to be the problem, not necessarily the ideas I have in my head. Although I tend to go off on random tangents. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so not only did I want to say thank you and share a little bit of where I've been. I know that was pretty brief, but I also just kind of wanted to reintroduce myself because things have changed, but also like people don't really know who I am. So yes, again, my name is Jessica Lang. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of California. So that's where I got my license. I was reflecting, oh my gosh, I finished grad school 10 years ago. So I've been doing this for 10 years, being a therapist for 10 years, which is crazy. But I'm also licensed in Florida to provide telehealth. And then I also see clients who live abroad, primarily in Israel, because that's where I lived. I know the laws. But I do get people from other countries who reach out because they're looking for a therapist. In my private practice, we don't really say specialized, but my area of focus tends to be on child sexual abuse survivors. I have an additional kind of like branch to that, or specialty, is working with women who are survivors of sexual abuse from their mothers. So that is a really, it's a part of our field, my field as a therapist, that people don't know about because it's not really talked about, and there's just not a lot of research. But it just kind of stumbled upon being my additional area of expertise. So that's what I do. And in my therapy practice, I use Bruce Perry's NMT model. I was trained in it years ago when I did agency work. It talks all about the brain. It's really like an assessment tool. Even though he says you just use this as one of many, it's really cool because it gives you an opportunity to look at the brain, region of the brain, which develops in like a hierarchy. And you can check out some of my old videos. I've talked about that before, so I won't go into it now. But you look at different regions of the brain and you see which parts are maybe underdeveloped, which parts are, more developed. And when you focus in on treatment, you're going to focus on the parts that are underdeveloped. And it doesn't mean that this is not related to any type of neurodivergency or anything like that. It's just more of when we our brains develop in like a sequential fashion. Think of it like building blocks. Each thing develops and goes upon the one that came before, kind of a thing. And so if you have trauma or attachment disruptions, then what you'll notice is some parts will be underdeveloped and other parts will be more developed because stress response system was more active. There was a more hyper focus on this area because survival was most paramount. And so when we go in and we're helping children, it's initially used for children, but as he's been doing more and more of it, we use it with adults. They're starting to use it more within the 0 to 5 population. So when I did my certification to be an infant mental health specialist, I did a couple brain maps on some little ones. I think there were one. So they're doing more of that. So you can see kind of where people are and then the areas you want to hone in and focus. So I do that as part of my assessment process with my clients. So I know kind of the area that I should be targeting first. And it's usually kind of the lower parts of the brain to help bring on the cortex, which kind of mediates a lot of the reactions. Okay. So I didn't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but that's what I do. I do NMTs. I also just do them on standalone NMT. So people contact me and ask me to assess, their child or a client if it's, an agency. So I'll do those. And I have a lot of fun with it. Last year I started somatic experiencing training. So I'm in intermediate level and that's all about the brain, the body and the nervous system. And we really go into parasympathetic and sympathetic system. Again, it's connected to the brain. It's your nervous system. It's all about how your body responds when it's under a threat or under attack, overwhelming stress. So we want to do things to kind of calm the system down. So the two work really well together. And then underlying all of that is attachment. I've always been a huge fan of attachment theory. Even when I first became a therapist, I was into attachment theory. So we know that relationships are crucial in helping us develop as people, and it's also the primary method of healing for people who've experienced trauma. And so it's a big tent, the attachment, but that's why I talk on this channel about all of those things, because that's what I do in my practice and that's what I found and my clients have found to be really helpful in their healing journey. So I just talk about that here on this channel. I created this channel. My goal was to help people who had experienced abuse as children learn some tips and some techniques, but also understand that they're not alone. It's not their fault. Some of the big reactions that we have as adults are because some of these conditioned responses we have as a result of repeated traumas or, overwhelming threats to our system, lack of support, lack of attunement from caregivers, all of that stuff. So that's why on this channel I talk a lot about attachment and I talk about the brain. And, I also not only like to talk about that, but I've talked in the past about, general mental health stuff, things in the media, books, that I found to be really helpful. And in my next video, I actually go back in time to the movie that really helped me be a therapist. So that's why I wanted to create today's video also, because I don't know why it popped in my head. I was reflecting on kind of my journey as a therapist and got me interested in psychology. I was like 10, 11, I don't know, I was a preteen in the 90s, and there was a radio program called Loveline, and it was from 10 to 12 at night. I think it was Sunday through Thursday now that I think about it, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. But people would call up on this program and they would have all these issues. They usually were calling about it was about sex, like their sexual problems or, problems in relationships. And there were teenagers who would call, there were young adults who would call. And the show was hosted by Dr. Drew Pinsky. He's an addiction medicine specialist. And then Adam Carolla, who I guess was like a DJ or a comedian, I don't really know, but they were on the show together when I listened to back in the day. So people would call up and they would ask these questions, and so Dr. Drew would give his advice and Adam would make some joke. I mean, he also gave advice, but people, if they're having a medical issue or, a lot of times, I actually was listening to an episode as I was falling asleep. It reminded me of being a kid, falling asleep to the episodes on the radio, but somebody was calling about Prozac, and so he was talking about Prozac and how it causes sexual dysfunction. So he did things like that. And that's why people would call. And I was just a kid who was interested in, a friend of mine, my best friend, we're still friends to this day. She was the one who told me about it. And so I started listening to it. And these people would call up talking about their sexual dysfunctions or their fears in relationship and all of that. And Dr. Drew would say something like, what happened to you in your childhood? And inevitably, there was always some issue with abuse or some parent with alcoholism. And I was just fascinated by that, that these people who were different ages were struggling in the present because of things that happened in their childhood. Now, again, I'm like 12, 10, something like that when I'm listening to this. So I obviously didn't know that was a thing. And so that got me interested in therapy, got me interested in psychology and, wanting to help people who had been abused when they were children so that they didn't have problems into adulthood. And so I would recommend listening to the program. Again, it's on YouTube. I'll link it below. Somebody's posted all the, posted all the old clips on YouTube, so you can watch it. I will say, and this is also what I want to talk about, the information and the tactics, a lot of it is outdated. There's a lot of misogynistic comments, sexist comments. I would say if you go back, there are comments that, we would definitely say now are problematic. It's some misogynistic comments, comments that could feel like victim blaming. And I don't like to make the excuse of like, that's the product of its times, but there were people my age and younger and older who were listening to these two, and maybe they might have internalized some of this stuff. Like an example was, they had a guest on, and there was this conversation about evolutionary psychology, and Dr. Drew is like asking why women, it was always women, whose fathers were alcoholic a-holes, that was his word, alcoholic a-holes, why they would choose a partner who was an alcoholic a-hole if their father was an alcoholic a-hole. And so his theory was that, and he was like, what's the evolutionary basis? Like, you would think for the propagation of the species that, well, they wouldn't do that and all that. And so the guest, it was a woman, she was an actress, I don't remember her name, she was like, well, I believe it's because, there's like a conditioned response there, as to why women end up in these relationships. It's like, that's what they know. So they go into this relationship. And this is from like 96 or 97. And Dr. Drew was like, no, I just think that like they have low self-esteem, something to that effect. And they've internalized the messaging that they're not worthy and blah, blah, blah. And I just shook my head because I'm a therapist. I've been doing this for 10 years. I work with trauma. I do brain mapping, right? I do somatic experiencing. Like that, we know with neuroscience today that it's actually closer to what the other woman said. It's more about conditioned responses. It's more about if you grow up in a certain environment, your body adapts to being in that environment. So even if you on a cognitive level, or me who haven't been raised with an alcoholic parent, I would look at, well, why would you be with this person who's an alcoholic? Because I didn't have that experience. My body has an experience that, somebody who's struggling with alcohol, who maybe is aggressive or whatever, I might side-eye them. Whereas somebody who grew up in that environment, their body might be freaked out by it, but there's also some familiarity with that. And our brain, I should say, our brains are lazy. They like what they're familiar with because they know how to act accordingly. The change, the shifting, the being able to identify patterns, that takes work. Novelty is what the threat is. Novelty is what often activates the stress response system. And so it's not a person's fault that, and I don't want to use young women, because it's not only women who have these patterns, even though that's what the area of focus on, was, which is why I called it out as misogynistic. Any child who grows up in what we would deem like, maybe a chaotic environment, or one where there's a lot of stress and a lot of threat, if that's the only thing they know, they don't have a whole lot of they don't have a lot of relational buffers, then that environment becomes their norm. And even though they get activated and they have fear responses, their body still knows what to do in those situations. And we know with the brain, right, when we get information that comes in through our five senses, it comes up through the brainstem. So that's our first stop. Then it goes to the limbic system, and then it finally gets up to the cortex. But if at the brainstem level, I go, this is a threat, freak out moment, got to protect myself moment, then you just go into automatic reaction. It doesn't ever get a chance to get up here until the person feels safe or calm. But we also know that if you are an overwhelming, we also know that in those situations where there is an overwhelming sense of threat, where you go into fight or flight mode, you get tunnel vision, right? You just focus in on trying to escape that attack. And so memory gets jumbled, because your body's storing some of this in different parts of the body, and it doesn't get a chance to get all the way in up to the top part of the brain. It might get trapped in certain parts, and so you get gaps in your memory. So like I said, he was definitely wrong. It definitely felt like victim blaming also. Like, well, why would you be with an alcoholic? Blah, blah, blah. Well, because most of the time people don't go, that's right, I want to be with an alcoholic a-hole because I feel like I have low self-esteem. Like, nobody thinks that. But there's certain qualities that we are attracted to, and that people are attracted to in us, because it's familiar in some way on a neurobiological basis. And so to actively kind of go against what our body knows how to adapt to or how to adjust to takes a lot of work and can be quite exhausting. And so if you're somebody who's like, gosh, why do I keep dating losers, or all of that nonsense, the first step is to kind of go to maybe examine your childhood and to figure out, I wonder what about this person feels familiar. And then oftentimes people get stuck, and that's when, we start talking about, fight, flight, freeze. It's not just like a frozen stuckness, but triggers, reminders of the threat or whatever, conditioned responses. We can be conditioned to go right into automatic freeze when a threat is so similar to something that we've experienced before, and our body has a memory of it, and then we just automatically respond. And when we're children, infants, toddlers, especially stuff that happens under 5, a lot of that becomes imprinted and ingrained, and we don't even recognize that we are reacting until well beyond. We have way more instances of freezing than we do of pulling ourselves out of freeze, until we, as adults, or children who, are lucky enough to get out of those abusive environments, can work on mobilizing the body again and getting unstuck from those stuck, frozen responses. But again, it takes a lot of, not practice, but repetition. There's a lot of repetitions that kind of get us into these conditioned responses. So to shift them, to create new neural networks, we have to actively do things differently, and do them again and again and again. Just like for the first template that got laid down, it was repetitions that made the neural pathway. So to shift it, you have to do the same thing, but now you have, you've got, now you've got a little bit more awareness about what's going on, as opposed to like being a 5-year-old and things are just happening to you. So anyway, I hope this all made sense. But I just wanted to, first video back, just jump in, share where I've been, talk about my own journey of what got me wanting to be a therapist, which was watching the show called Loveline, and or listening to Loveline on the radio. And I really thought that, everything that they said was 100% right, and they were perfect. And, the field has changed. Even when I was in grad school, and that was not grad school, but when I was undergrad, so 2004, that's a long time. And I took some developmental psych classes and cognitive psychology classes. There was still the belief that babies who are abused, toddlers who are abused, was not as damaging or didn't have as long lasting repercussions as older children because they didn't have memory of it. And if they didn't have memory, then they were just instantly more resilient. And that was garbage. That's garbage, speaking as somebody who's been in the field long enough. But even with family members, I can see the imprint of, a 10-month-old who lived with drug parents who were addicted to drugs, addicted to crack to be more specific, and who were homeless, and they neglected this child, and seeing how to this day certain behaviors are still there. Food insecurity, even though this person has been adopted into a different family and has been like that for over 20 years, still food insecurity. They haven't seen these people since they were 10 months old and the child was starving, and yet still struggle with food insecurity, binge eating, living in filth, right? And I'm not talking about like a messy house. I'm talking about like 10 garbage bags worth of stuff going on in this person's living space, because as a child, that's what that was familiar. There's like an unknown comfort and familiarity to that. And 10, 20 years ago when I was just, not 10, 20 years ago, 10 years ago when I was just learning psychology in undergrad and grad school, and this person had therapists, they probably were operating from the same old school manual too. This person doesn't remember, it's not that big of a deal. But I see it now as an adult who has way more training. We see the effects. Oh, wow, that is from that early childhood stuff, that early neglect. If I was this person's therapist, because I'm not this person's therapist, I would be working on all that underdeveloped stuff that's probably in the brainstem. Some type of reaction is happening that makes the child feel, or not child anymore, feel comfortable in that level of filth. Sorry, I keep calling it filth, but it was like 20 garbage bags. There's something that is very comforting for the body to be in that way, that needs to be addressed. And so that's what I would be tackling if I was this person's therapist. But when that adult was a child having therapy, nobody thought to address that, or had the tools about the NMT because it didn't exist at the time. I don't know if somatic experience, I think somatic experiencing did exist, but first off, it was usually, it was used for mainly adults. That's what I was trying to say. Not necessarily for children. I use it with children who are of a certain age, but it's, wasn't something that wasn't as well known. And then when you're dealing with insurance companies and, Optum, Medi-Cal, whatever it is, they like evidence-based treatment. Roll my eyes about that. So something like TFCBT was really common in when I did agency work, and I would never do CBT with somebody who had trauma. I just would not do it. It's not helpful. Some people have found help. Don't come at me, therapists who say, I do TFCBT. I find it has not been my experience that it's been helpful with people who have complex trauma, because you really got to work on that body-based stuff, those early attachment disruptions, the underdeveloped parts of the brain. Like, you really need to work on that stuff. So you're looking more at doing more body-based exercises, which somatic experiencing is. Some psychomotor psychotherapy is like that. Anyway, I went off on a tangent. See, I always go off on a tangent. So anyway, I hope you all found this video helpful. Please comment down below. Let me know if you found this video helpful, what other types of videos you'd like to see. Also, what are your thoughts about some of the things that maybe you grew up watching, especially if it deals with any type of mental health or it's in the psychology world. Thinking about like the movie Girl Interrupted. I should probably watch that movie again. Actually, it's been a while. but any movie like that maybe you grew up on, where it gave you this impression of what mental health was or what therapists did, and then you fast forward 10-15 years and you're like, that's not really correct. So I definitely would like to hear from you. Thank you all so much for subscribing, for being a part of the community. Please stay respectful and supportive in the comments. I look forward to reading them, and also I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. So thank you. Bye.